This is a special edition of Forward DFW from the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum and their fight for equality for all. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Forward DFW together with the Dallas Morning News. I'm Ron Corning, and we are coming to you from on location at the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum in downtown Dallas. This exhibit where I am right now is the Rise Up exhibit. It's a national traveling exhibit which chronicles the history of the LGBTQ community's fight for human rights. We are joined by the president and CEO of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, Mary Pat Higgins. Mary Pat, thank you for being here. This exhibit has been here since the 25th of January and will be in place until the 18th of June. What's the feedback been to this point on the positive side?
We've had tremendous feedback, Ron. There have been so many people, organizations throughout our community who work to promote LGBTQ rights, who have been so appreciative that our museum has this exhibit. People have come through and said they learned history they should have known, but never knew. And there's just a huge sense of gratitude that the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum is focusing on this effort.
Let's make it clear for people. From the outset, this institution was meant to be not just a place to chronicle the history of the Holocaust, but also to find a footing for equal and human rights movements moving forward. This is part of that. Some people have said, this is bold. And by that, they might be saying, why are you doing this? You would say what to that?
I would say our job is to teach North Texas about the impacts of unchecked prejudice and hatred. We hold up the Holocaust as the paradigm of genocide, the only time that every man, woman, and child were targeted to be murdered. But it's not the only time in history that people have been persecuted. There's so many groups of people over time and in current day that are being persecuted based on their religion, their race, their identity, their sexual orientation. And the connecting link in all of that history is what happens when ordinary people, good people, stand by and don't speak up when they see someone being bullied, being targeted, being hated. Our hope is that people will stand up against that in our community.
And in many cases, it doesn't happen overnight, right? It's a process.
That's right.
And if you don't recognize the steps along the way in that process, then horrible things happen as part of the human condition, sadly.
So one of the galleries in our exhibit, Ron, is the 10 stages of genocide. And it's really, we were intentional when we were planning the exhibit because we wanted people to understand that process. It starts with classification, breaking people into groups. It progresses to discrimination. Dehumanization is always an important stage because it's easier to hate someone or even kill them if you view them as less than human. And we see that in society every day. People talking about others as if they were less than.
Mary Pat, this has been described as one of the richest and most in-depth histories of the LGBTQ movement for equality anywhere in the country. You must have recognized that on the front end, and that's why it's here.
We did, Ron. We were so excited when we found this exhibit. It was created by the Freedom Forum, and it starts before Stonewall because there were some really brave people in the 50s that were speaking out and promoting LGBTQ rights, really primarily gay rights at the time. But then Stonewall, as we know, in June of '69, really sparked a movement that took hold and brought about tremendous change. This exhibit has 85 artifacts. It has 3 original films. It teaches us about this movement through people's quest to be able to work and serve their country, to be able to love and marry whom they want to marry, to participate in religion. And there's a really great part of the exhibit that shows us how pop culture really influenced this movement and things that we'll all remember experiencing. Will and Grace, you know, how transformational that was.
And we have conversations, interestingly enough, all the way from Stonewall up through pop culture and marriage equality with thought leaders in Dallas. And we want to begin with Robert Emery, who is in his own right a historian for the LGBTQ community. All right, I'm here with Robert Emery. Happy to have this conversation. And Robert, I really have a hard time coming up with one title to describe you. So hopefully during the course of this conversation, people get an understanding of the breadth and depth of the work you do, and not just the awards you've received, but where your heart is in it, right? Because I know that you've made this your life's work. And we're starting here at this exhibit, the Stonewall exhibit, the moment, would you say, in history when this movement took a turn?
If it celebrates Stonewall, then that is the most significant historical turning point in our struggle so far.
And what about it do you think made it the turning point?
There were uprisings before Stonewall, and there were uprisings since Stonewall. But what makes Stonewall significant is it continued for 6 consecutive nights, and it got media attention. Visibility provides its power.
It would be some 46 years after that, though, before the next defining moment with marriage equality arguably would come our way. And we'll talk about what that meant and why it took so long. But back to this moment, this signage here in particular really is something that speaks to you. And why is that?
Well, this is the most fantastic exhibit I've ever seen on this subject of gay rights in America. And of this huge and beautiful, important exhibit, my heart lives right here in this tiny spot, because this is a picture of a window in Stonewall the morning after the first night of riots. And may I read it to you?
Absolutely.
We homosexuals plead with our people to please help maintain peaceful and quiet conduct on the streets of the village. It's signed by the Mattachine. And what this tells us is that if you're a good street fighter, then do that. If you're better at negotiating in a boardroom, do that. We need everybody in the fight for equality. If you're a writer, write. If you're a painter, paint. If you're an ally, be an ally. Just do it. But this tells us that it takes everyone.
And it really did take everyone. Everyone coalesced around this particular issue. For those who don't know, this was a raid on an LGBT bar in the Village neighborhood of New York City, and it began to change the conversation. Where did it go from there? You were 9 years old at the time. Were you mindful of it at 9 years old?
No. Stonewall meant nothing to almost anyone in Dallas, Texas. What ignited our righteous fire was Anita Bryant.
That was it for you?
That was it for me, and if you ask most Dallasites.
Because she tapped into life in the Midwest, life in the South?
Because she took it on as a national
issue.
So you come after us, we're going to stand up.
Yeah.
Anita Bryant represented the Florida orange growers, and organizers created a boycott on orange juice nationally until the Florida orange growers felt the pain. Anita Bryant was fired, and we have moved on from there, but she was the fire.
You have been awarded with a number of accolades for your work, Texan of the Year, LGBT Texan of the Year, for your activism, for the way in which you preserve history, and the way in which you sort of look to the future. And I want to talk about that because many of the young people we see here, for example, in this photo, may be of the LGBTQ community and are now, this many years later, at the point where they're seeking services as they're aging, right? And they're seeking to be in environments, assisted living, nursing homes, medical care, et cetera, home health care, where they're not discriminated against. And I know it's an issue because I've covered it. Talk to me about where your heart is with that.
We founded in 2014 the Coalition for Aging LGBT, and we represent the 200,000 LGBT seniors who live in North Texas. These people here in this photograph were kids in 1969, but now they need our help. They are the Stonewall generation. They fought and they died for every right and privilege we enjoy today. So to advocate for those who first advocated for us is our greatest honor.
And it brings equality full circle, right? Where people deserve to be treated equally at every stage of their life for every need and service.
Yes.
Yeah. You have said before, I don't want to take words from your mouth, but the election of Barack Obama did not end racism. Marriage equality, which came 46 years after this, has not ended discrimination against those who are LGBTQ. You say, what about that? It feels like one step forward, two steps back. That's what it feels like. And you, with the benefit of history and your work, would say what to that?
I would say we take two steps forward and are pushed back one step. Always, we are moving forward. People are evolving. People's hearts are opening up. Visibility is everything, and we are moving forward.
Is the community rallying in all the right ways to help those in the trans community who now appear to be squarely, in the bullseye when it comes to some of these verbal and sometimes physical and violent attacks?
I would hope so. We're trying very hard. There's a lot of organization around that. And if there's one thing that our community knows how to do, because of the AIDS epidemic, we know how to organize.
Mm-hmm. Texas is sometimes encumbered by the perception that we are not on the right side of history in many ways. I live here in Texas, and specifically in Dallas, which I see as a very different place than the perception of Texas as a whole. And in fact, Dallas, with your leadership, has been one of the first cities in the nation to really document LGBTQ history. For those who might see this elsewhere outside of this state, at this location as we stand here in the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, to that perception, what would you say to people?
Texas, as a state, is hostile toward its LGBTQ citizens. The 2106 section of our criminal code has been proven multiple times to be unconstitutional and proven that it cannot be acted upon. And yet, our Texas legislature will not remove it from the books. Should have been removed in the 80s, should have been removed 35 years ago. Mm-hmm. They leave it there.
And that's the criminality of homosexuality.
That's the criminality of same-sex relations.
Yeah, same-sex relations, yeah.
That's very telling. And we know, because they've said it out loud, exactly why they do it. Because they intend to reinstate it, and when they do, it's instantly there. They don't have to wait the month or 6 weeks it takes to get it back on the books. It's there. That's very hostile. So the question is, why do we live here? And I like to tell people that there are two options. You can run for freedom, and I applaud that if that's what you wish. But some of us choose to stay and fight.
And advocate for change.
And advocate for change. And advocate for those who cannot advocate for themselves. That we consider ourselves very lucky to be in that position, to advocate for people who cannot advocate for themselves.
Well, there are many who will say they're lucky that you've been on the front lines for as long as you have. So thank you. Appreciate
Thank you very
Robert
much.
Emery.
Thank you.
To purchase tickets to the Rise Up exhibit at the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, go to dhhrm.org/tickets. I'm back with Gary Sanchez. He's one of the senior directors at Visit Dallas, and we're standing here in the exhibit for the HIV/AIDS epidemic, which hit in the early 80s. You and I are of similar age. We grew up in small towns, different corners of America. I was in the Northeast. You were in Laredo, Texas. And we became teenagers as this was making the news. And it changed the way that we saw ourselves, did it not?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ron. Being born in the early to mid-'70s and growing up in the '80s and knowing the entire time of who I was internally, being bullied for just me behaving like my natural self.
And they may not have known you were gay necessarily,
Right.
but something about you was different.
Right. Absolutely.
And it made it easy for you to be a target. And then this crisis and the way it was covered and depicted in the media, I think also depicted the gay community as the bad other.
Right. Being bullied at school during the day, going home, knowing who I was, not being able to share that, seeing what was happening in the world as it relates to HIV and AIDS, and thinking that one day that's going to happen to me. What does that do to a child of that age? And to your point earlier, and what we heard from Robert Emery, there's so much progress that occurred after the Stonewall riots, and even some before that. And we made some progress, and then with the AIDS/HIV epidemic, took us a couple of steps back.
Yeah, that was the step back,
Right.
2 steps forward. and one step back, and may have delayed your ability to accept who you were and come out to your family and friends. It may have stunted that, don't you think?
Absolutely. Always being intimidated to come out because the fear of being not welcome in my own home. Thankfully, I come from a loving family and wonderful parents, and so that didn't occur. But I do remember when I did come out finally to my family in 1994, and the first thing out of my mom's mouth was, "I don't want you to die of AIDS."
Yeah, yeah. And don't you think in great part that was because of inaction at the time by the Reagan administration to acknowledge and to act on this crisis that was killing people. And as Robert Emory said, maybe for some people, this disease was killing all the right people.
Right. Unfortunately, that was a sentiment coming from.
That's a special kind of hate.
That is, and it was coming from people of influence, from elected officials, from people in the faith community. But I'm very, very thankful for individuals who had the courage to stand up, act up, the organizing of that in the late 80s, for all the work that Ryan White did, and the Ryan White Cares Act that is still in place today.
Showing that HIV and AIDS wasn't just affecting the gay community, but his mom became a straight ally.
Absolutely.
For the gay community, which was sort of an important way to package all that together, really, and be heard for the community. So fast forward to the late 90s, it seemed like progress in a way, for the sake of this conversation, sort of picked up steam again.
Right.
We had Ellen come out, which seemed to be a seismic moment. I remember thinking this is a good thing. And then her show was canceled and she wasn't fully accepted or embraced, it would seem. But then others came after her, Will and Grace and Queer Eye for the Straight Guy in those years between 97 and 2003. Do you remember feeling hopeful that those pop culture moments were putting us ahead of the game a little bit, that we were making progress again?
Yeah, I absolutely do think so. It was such a joy to grow up around that, right? To see it occurring in real time. You mentioned Ellen, of course, and that's just one of the celebrities who had the courage to come out and be herself. And then all the others that followed after her. And we see them here at the exhibition. It's depicted here.
It's now history. Do you realize that?
Yeah.
We used to have what seems like yesterday watch parties on Thursday nights for Will and Grace. And now it's literally part of the documented history of the evolution of equality for the LGBTQ community. Did you imagine that marriage equality would be something that would happen in your lifetime?
No.
No.
I didn't.
You just took it for granted that it wouldn't happen.
Right. I'm thankful it did. 2015 was a wonderful year because of that. The fight isn't over, as we've observed more recently. We're still
don't
under
you
attack.
think that milestone actually has fueled some of the hate that now is bubbling up and being directed toward all members of the community, but particularly the trans community?
Yep, absolutely. Unfortunately, we've seen, not just in Texas, but across the country, the trans community being attacked. Typically, the marginalized communities are the ones that are targeted. We've done, and we continue to do a lot of work on behalf of the trans community so that not only they, but all of the letters across the LGBTQ plus spectrum are protected.
Mm-hmm. And now that it's here, this exhibit is here, this museum is here, speaking to issues of human rights across the board, not just for members of the Jewish community, means what for Visit Dallas as you promote this city as a place that is wholly accepting and understanding of our history, the good and the bad.
Right. No, absolutely. And as we've seen and observed, not all history is pleasant history, right? But our job at Visit Dallas is to promote Dallas as a welcoming and inclusive community for everyone. This museum, this institution, and specifically this exhibition is just one of the many ways that we demonstrate how Dallas is a wonderful and a welcoming community to all. We want people to come to the city, want people to come to this museum, to experience this exhibition, and to walk away, to return home, feeling how welcoming and inclusive Dallas is.
The Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum would like to thank its sponsors for the Rise Up exhibit: Texas Instruments, Match Group, Visit Dallas, Fossil Group, Toyota, and American Airlines. And a special thank you to the Freedom Forum for developing the Rise Up exhibit. All right, everyone, our conversation continues with Cece Cox. She is the CEO of Resource Center in Dallas, which serves the LGBTQ community on so many levels. But I'm curious to know, you heard what Robert had to say about those in our population who are aging and in need of equality as they age, or deserve equality as they age. And you've broken ground on what is going to be the first affordable housing for seniors in the LGBTQ community. So to know his work and to see it come full circle in that way means what to you?
The evolution of our community in service to our community, but also in achieving rights and still struggling and fighting for rights. And Robert referenced the struggles in Texas and what's happening at the Texas legislature. And it's just an interesting place to be and an interesting time to be, because the legislature is doing what it's doing and it's really prioritizing and targeting our community. But at the same time, you talk to people who are either have LGBTQIA plus folks in their family, or they've, they have friends that are part of the community, and they support us. Mm-hmm. The overwhelming number of people in Texas and across the country support equal rights. So we're living in a dichotomy.
We are, and we're standing at the marriage equality exhibit as part of Rise Up. And I'm curious to know, can you concretely say for sure that legislatively nothing can be done to reverse marriage equality? Or are we still at risk? You can't say that.
Marriage is at risk. Justice Clarence Thomas in the summer of 2022 made it clear in his concurring opinion in the abortion case that fundamental rights are up for grabs. And one of those rights is marriage equality as established in Obergefell v. Hodges that the Supreme Court decided in 2015. Mm-hmm. So the community does not feel that all of our rights already established are enshrined or safe.
And in that case, this is Jim Obergefell, who was actually here in Dallas when that ruling came down. This was his partner who died before that ruling could be made. They raised $13,000 ahead of this ruling to fly him to Maryland to get married so that he could be on the death certificate and be able to visit his longtime partner and husband after getting married in Maryland. In Ohio, but Ohio wouldn't recognize it, and therein was the challenge.
Right.
That changed the course to this point of history for the rest of us. Do you remember where you were on that day, June 26, 2015?
I sure do. I was in my office at Resource Center, and Raphael McDonnell on our advocacy staff and I were monitoring the decisions coming out of the Supreme Court, and we didn't think that the Obergefell case would be the first one. For multiple reasons. And all of a sudden, boom, it came out. And it showed first that Justice Kennedy wrote the opinion, which signaled that it was going to be a positive opinion because of his history of.
But you still didn't. You didn't
you
count
don't know
those
until you
chickens
know.
yet. Yeah.
You do not know until you know. And so then we followed SCOTUS blog, and it was saying what was going on. And then we started reading the case, and just tears streamed down my face. And my phone rang right away. And Mike Rawlings was mayor at the time, and he called to essentially congratulate the community and express his joy that had happened, that the case had happened that way. And the day just went on from there. It was full of joy and action-packed.
I remember it well. Yeah. I also know that by the timeline, it took 46 years from that seismic event at Stonewall to this event. And I'm curious, in your mind, why did it take so long? And there are some who believed at the time it would never happen in their lifetime.
Securing rights take a long time. I mean, the United States is a democracy, and that has different meanings to different people, but it's essentially an experiment. And all along the way, marginalized groups have had to fight for the rights that are allegedly enshrined in the Constitution, but the words just don't translate into the way that human beings act. And so it just takes struggle, it takes toil, it takes brave people like these two gentlemen standing up, along with the other plaintiffs in the case. There were lots of families represented in that case, and people brave enough to stand up and say, I am a contributing person, a contributing citizen of this country, and I deserve equal rights.
I'm back now with the president and CEO of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, Mary Pat Higgins. And you've heard our guests, you've seen the interviews, their own personal takes on what it was like to live through it, but also how they feel about the marriage of this exhibit with your overall cause. What does that leave you with as we both shared this experience?
It leaves me with a tremendous amount of pride for our organization, for the Holocaust survivors of North Texas who had the dream of building this museum. Their hope was that we would spread the word and encourage people to stand up against hatred. And right now, it's hard not to see hatred and prejudice targeted at the LGBTQIA community everywhere you look. And so to have some of our incredible leaders in the LGBTQ community here talking about the importance of our museum makes me incredibly proud.
And this will be here through the majority of the month of June, through June 18th, which is Pride Month, nationwide. And we want to encourage people to visit it while it's here. It really is moving.
That's right.
And comprehensive. But what comes next in this very space?
Well, we close this on June 18th, and in July, we will open an exhibit called Black Citizenship in the Age of Jim Crow. So it picks up after the Civil War and looks at the strides that were made during Reconstruction and then the steps backward when Jim Crow laws became the rule and just the horrific oppression of Black citizens in the South during that time.
Yeah, as your mission continues.
That's right. That's right.
Mary Pat Higgins, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate
Ron.
it. And thank you all for joining us for Forward DFW, together with the Dallas Morning News. I'm Ron Corning. We'll see you next time. And remember, to purchase tickets to the Rise Up exhibit, go to dhhrm.org/tickets.